My best friend used me to get close to my rich boyfriend, so I got close to her baby daddy instead after catching her in his Tesla at 2 a.m. when she claimed to be visiting her sick mother in Ohio. The glow from Marcus's custom license plate illuminated Chelsea's face perfectly as she leaned across the center console, her hand on his thigh, laughing at something he said while I stood frozen in the parking garage of his downtown Boston high-rise. She was wearing my Chanel perfume, the one Marcus bought me for our anniversary, and her gym clothes were the exact brand and color I'd been wearing for months. The Tesla's door chimed as she opened it, and that's when she saw me standing there with my overnight bag, 3 hours earlier than I'd told Marcus I'd arrive, watching my best friend of 12 years climb out of my boyfriend's $70,000 car at 2 in the morning. Chelsea's face went through this remarkable transformation, shock melting into something almost like satisfaction before she caught herself and plastered on fake concern. She actually had the audacity to rush toward me with her arms out like she was going to hug me, asking what I was doing there so late, as if she wasn't the one who needed to explain herself. Marcus stepped out of the driver's side and I watched him calculate his response in real time, his mouth opening and closing twice before he settled on calling her an Uber because her car supposedly broke down near his building. The lie was so lazy it was almost insulting. I didn't scream or cry or throw my bag at either of them. I just smiled, told Chelsea her mother must have made a miraculous recovery from her illness in Ohio, and walked past them both into the building while Marcus called after me asking where I was going. The security guard, Ramon, who'd known me for the 2 years Marcus and I had been dating, saw everything and gave me this tiny nod as I headed for the elevator. I'd need Ramon later, so I made sure to remember that nod. Chelsea Monroe had been my best friend since sophomore year of college when we bonded over shared hatred of our statistics professor and love of true crime podcasts. We'd been inseparable, the kind of friends who knew each other's coffee orders and Netflix passwords and every embarrassing story from the past decade. When I started dating Marcus Ashford 6 months after his tech startup sold for $23 million, Chelsea had been genuinely happy for me, or so I'd thought. She'd helped me pick out outfits for our first fancy restaurant dates, listened to me gush about how different he was from other guys I'd dated, and sworn she'd never liked rich guys anyway, because they were usually assholes. But 3 months ago, she'd asked to join my gym, the expensive one in Back Bay that Marcus had added me to his membership for, claiming she needed motivation to work out. 2 months ago, she'd started asking detailed questions about Marcus's schedule, his favorite coffee shop, what time he usually went to the gym. 6 weeks ago, she'd bought the exact same Diptyque Bays perfume I wore every day, the one that cost $95 for a tiny bottle. And 2 weeks ago, I'd found her gym bag in Marcus's car when I'd borrowed it, tucked under the passenger seat with her lip gloss and hair tie inside. I hadn't said anything then because I wanted to be absolutely sure before I burned both their lives to the ground. What Chelsea didn't know was that I'd already had coffee with Tyler Brooks, her ex-boyfriend, and the father of her 3-year-old daughter, Emma. Tyler, who still paid her rent every month out of guilt, even though she'd cheated on him with her yoga instructor 2 years ago. Tyler, who she'd never bothered to remove from her iCloud family sharing account. Tyler, who'd spent the last month forwarding me screenshots of every suspicious text, every deleted photo, every calendar entry that showed Chelsea running into Marcus at the gym exactly when I'd told her he'd be there. I knew about the fake pregnancy test she'd already bought from Amazon. I knew about the Pinterest board she'd made called Ashford Wedding Dreams that she thought was private. I knew she'd been Googling how to make a rich man fall in love with you and signs he's going to leave his girlfriend. What I didn't know yet was whether Marcus was actively pursuing her or just enjoying the attention of a woman who was pathetically obvious in her intentions. But I was about to find out, and both of them were about to learn that the quiet, sweet girl who organized their birthdays and loaned Chelsea money and played nice with Marcus's obnoxious college friends was capable of things that would make their carefully constructed fantasy world collapse so completely they'd never recover. The elevator ride to Marcus's penthouse felt like it took hours, even though it was only 45 seconds. I used my key to let myself in, noting that he'd finally fixed the sticking lock he'd been complaining about for weeks. Fresh flowers sat on the entry table, not the bodega roses he usually grabbed, but an expensive arrangement from that boutique florist on Newberry Street. I walked through the apartment methodically, photographing everything with my phone. The second wine glass in the sink with Chelsea's signature berry lipstick on the rim. The throw blanket on the couch folded wrong, the way Chelsea folded things, not how Marcus's cleaning lady did it. A bobby pin under the coffee table, the exact tortoiseshell kind Chelsea bought in bulk from Target. I heard the apartment door open and Marcus's voice calling my name, sounding nervous now, no longer confident. He found me sitting on his leather couch, legs crossed, scrolling through my phone with what I knew looked like unsettling calm. He started talking immediately, the same Uber story but more elaborate now, adding details about how Chelsea had called him panicked and he'd felt obligated to help because she was my best friend. When I asked him why she'd been in his building's parking garage instead of somewhere near her broken-down car, he stumbled, said she'd gotten an Uber here first because it was closer, which made absolutely no sense, but he was committed to the story. I asked him if he was sleeping with her and watched his face carefully. The denial came fast, too fast, with too much outrage. I asked him if he wanted to sleep with her and got a different response, a pause, a calculation of how honest he could afford to be. He settled on telling me she'd been friendly, but he'd never encouraged it, that if I was uncomfortable, he'd stop working out at the gym during the times she was there, that he valued our relationship too much to risk it over some misunderstanding. The word misunderstanding hung in the air like a physical thing between us. I nodded slowly and told him I believed him, which was a lie, but I needed him to think I was convinced. I said I was tired from my trip, that we could talk more in the morning, and watched relief flood his features. He actually thought he'd gotten away with it. They both did. What Marcus didn't know was that my overnight bag wasn't packed for a romantic surprise visit. It was packed because I'd already moved half my important things out of my apartment in preparation for what came next. What neither of them knew was that Tyler and I had spent the last 3 weeks building a case that would destroy both their reputations, their careers, and any chance they had of ending up together. What Chelsea especially didn't know was that her iCloud account had given me access to something she'd desperately hidden from everyone, including Marcus, the secret that was going to make watching her world burn even more satisfying than I'd imagined. I waited exactly 3 days before making my next move, long enough for Marcus and Chelsea to relax into the belief that their lie had worked. Marcus had been extra attentive those 72 hours, sending flowers to my office, suggesting we take a weekend trip to Newport, texting me constantly with heart emojis and inside jokes. Chelsea had called me twice, both times sounding cheerful and concerned, asking if everything was okay with Marcus, if I wanted to get brunch and talk about it. The performance was almost impressive in its shamelessness. I accepted Marcus's invitation to dinner at Astra, one of those restaurants where entrees start at $60 and everyone there is either closing business deals or celebrating something expensive. He was closing a deal, though he didn't know it yet. Tyler had been busy during those 3 days. He'd consolidated every screenshot, every suspicious calendar entry, every deleted photo that Chelsea thought was gone forever from her iCloud. She'd been sloppy about covering her tracks, probably because she'd never expected her ex-boyfriend to still have access to her digital life. The pregnancy test she'd bought wasn't just any pregnancy test. It was one of those fake positive ones sold online for pranks, delivered to Tyler's address where she still received mail. He'd signed for the package himself and sent me a photo of the packing slip. She'd also been messaging someone named Derek from her yoga studio, talking about phase 2 of her plan and how once she announced the pregnancy, Marcus would have to choose. The messages made it clear Derek was getting a cut of whatever money Chelsea managed to extract from the situation. Apparently, my best friend had turned gold digging into a team sport. At dinner, Marcus ordered champagne, the expensive kind that comes in a black bottle. He reached across the table to hold my hand and started talking about our future, about maybe looking at houses in Brookline next spring, about how lucky he was to have found someone who wasn't with him for his money. The irony was so thick I could taste it alongside the $30 appetizer. I smiled and squeezed his hand back and told him I'd been thinking about our future too, that I'd actually been doing a lot of thinking. He looked pleased, probably imagining I was about to suggest moving in together or some other deepening of commitment. Instead, I casually mentioned that I'd had coffee with Tyler Brooks earlier that week, watching Marcus's expression carefully. The name didn't register immediately. I clarified that Tyler was Chelsea's ex, Emma's father, and saw the moment recognition hit. Marcus's hand tensed around mine and he asked why I'd met with him, keeping his voice carefully neutral. I said Tyler had reached out because he was concerned about Chelsea's behavior lately, that he'd noticed she was spending a lot of money on new clothes and gym memberships, and wondered if everything was okay financially. The lie came easily, and Marcus bought it because he wanted to believe I was still in the dark. He said Chelsea had mentioned having some financial stress, that her marketing job didn't pay well, and maybe that's why she'd seemed to be networking more lately. Networking. That's what he called her calculated stalking of him at the gym every morning. I told Marcus that Tyler had mentioned something else too. Something Chelsea had apparently let slip to him when they'd exchanged Emma last weekend. She told Tyler she was seeing someone new. Someone with money who could give her the life she deserved. Marcus went very still across the table. I continued, saying Tyler seemed worried this mystery man might be married or otherwise unavailable, given how secretive Chelsea was being about his identity. I watched Marcus process this information, watched him wonder if Chelsea had been playing him the same way she'd been playing me. The seed of doubt was planted. By the time our entrees arrived, he'd checked his phone 3 times, something he never did during our dates. After dinner, Marcus suggested going back to his place. I agreed, but said I needed to stop by my apartment first to grab something. He offered to come with me, which was new, probably wanting to keep me close after the Tyler conversation had rattled him. We pulled up to my building in the Tesla and I told him to wait in the car. I'd just be 5 minutes. Instead, I went inside and texted Chelsea from the lobby. I told her Marcus had just dropped me off, that he seemed distant and distracted, that I was worried he might be losing interest. Her response came within seconds. Paragraphs of reassurance about how Marcus was just stressed with work, how I shouldn't worry, how she'd talk to him if I wanted since they'd become friendly at the gym. The message made my skin crawl with its fake concern and barely concealed excitement. I thanked her and said that would be really helpful, that I trusted her judgment about guys since she'd always been better at reading them than I was. She replied with heart emojis and promises to help fix everything. I went back to Marcus's car and told him I was actually exhausted, that maybe I should just sleep at my own place tonight. He looked disappointed but didn't argue, probably grateful for the space to text Chelsea without me around. I kissed him goodnight and watched him drive away, then went back inside and called Tyler. Phase 2 was ready to begin, and it started with giving Chelsea exactly what she thought she wanted: access to Marcus without me in the way. The next morning, Marcus texted me that he had back-to-back meetings all day and probably couldn't see me until the weekend. I responded with understanding and support, exactly what a trusting girlfriend would say. What I actually did was get in my car and drive to the gym at exactly 9:30, the time Chelsea's Instagram stories showed she'd been arriving every day for the past 6 weeks. She was there, of course, on the elliptical with a clear view of the entrance, her hair in that effortlessly messy ponytail that probably took 20 minutes to perfect. She looked surprised and guilty when she saw me, recovering quickly with exaggerated excitement about what a coincidence this was. I told her I'd decided to start coming to morning sessions instead of evenings, that I needed to de-stress about the Marcus situation, and exercise always helped clear my head. Chelsea's face did something complicated, disappointment and calculation fighting for dominance. She suggested we grab smoothies after our workout and really talk about everything. We sat in the gym's cafe and I laid out my fictional problems with Marcus. I told her he'd been distant, that I wondered if he was getting bored with me, that I felt insecure about not being sophisticated enough for his world. Chelsea ate it up, offering advice that was clearly designed to make me feel worse while positioning herself as the better option. She suggested maybe Marcus needed someone who understood ambition better, someone who could match his drive. When I asked what she meant, she backpedaled, but the mask had slipped enough for me to see the calculation underneath. Then I dropped the bomb I'd been saving. I told her I'd been thinking about taking a break from Marcus, that maybe we'd moved too fast and I needed space to figure out what I really wanted. Chelsea's eyes lit up like I'd handed her a winning lottery ticket. She tried to hide it, going through the motions of discouraging me from making any hasty decisions, but her heart wasn't in the performance anymore. She could practically taste victory. I said I wasn't sure yet, that I needed a few days to think, and watched her brain immediately start calculating how quickly she could move in on Marcus once I was officially out of the picture. That afternoon, Tyler sent me screenshots of Chelsea's messages to Derek. She was celebrating, telling him the girlfriend was having doubts, and she just needed to give it one more push. She'd planned to accidentally run into Marcus at his favorite coffee shop that evening and express concern about me, plant seeds about how I wasn't happy, how she'd always thought we were mismatched. Derek's responses were encouraging her to move fast before I changed my mind. They discussed timing for the fake pregnancy announcement, agreeing that 2 weeks after Chelsea and Marcus started officially dating would be optimal. She'd already researched which doctor's office had the easiest forms to forge for proof of pregnancy. The level of premeditation was actually impressive in its sociopathy. I forwarded everything to my lawyer, who I'd retained quietly the week before. She was drawing up documentation for something Chelsea and Marcus wouldn't see coming until it was too late to stop. But legal revenge wasn't enough for what they'd done. I wanted them to feel the same humiliation I'd felt standing in that parking garage watching my best friend climb out of my boyfriend's car. I wanted their betrayal exposed in a way that would follow them forever, that would make everyone they knew understand exactly what kind of people they were. That evening, Marcus texted asking if we could talk. I suggested meeting at the park near his building the next afternoon, somewhere public but private enough for a serious conversation. He agreed immediately, probably relieved I was making it easy for him to dump me. What he didn't know was that Chelsea had texted him within an hour of our gym conversation, expressing concern about my state of mind and offering to be there for him if things got complicated with me. He'd responded thanking her for being such a good friend, but Tyler's access to her deleted messages showed she'd sent him a selfie from the gym that morning with the caption, "Accidentally matching your type today," and he'd replied with a fire emoji before deleting it. They thought they were being careful. They had no idea how careless they'd actually been. I spent that evening at Tyler's apartment going over our plan one more time. He'd been more than willing to help destroy Chelsea, but his motivation wasn't just spite. He wanted full custody of Emma, and Chelsea's scheme to trap a rich man with a fake pregnancy was exactly the kind of evidence a family court judge would love to see when evaluating parental fitness. He'd already filed the preliminary paperwork, which Chelsea didn't know about because she never checked the mail at his address anymore, too focused on her Marcus project to bother with mundane details like legal documents. Tyler showed me the folder he'd compiled, everything organized chronologically, every piece of evidence documented and verified. He'd even hired a private investigator who'd confirmed Chelsea had no mother in Ohio, had never had one, that the sick mother story was something she'd used before to explain suspicious absences. The investigator had also followed Chelsea and Marcus for the past week, documenting 3 separate occasions where they'd been alone together at his apartment while telling me they were elsewhere. The photos were intimate, not quite incriminating enough to prove a physical affair, but showing a level of emotional connection that Marcus had been denying existed. In one photo, Chelsea was wearing one of my jackets that I'd left at Marcus's place, and the investigator had timestamped it at 2 p.m. on a day she'd told me she was at a work conference. Marcus's hand was on her lower back in another photo, a gesture of familiarity that contradicted everything he'd claimed about their relationship being purely friendly. I drove home that night feeling calm, the kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly how the next 72 hours would unfold. Marcus thought he was about to break up with the girlfriend who'd become inconvenient. Chelsea thought she was about to steal the rich boyfriend she'd been chasing for months. Instead, they were both about to discover that underestimating the quiet, sweet girl who organized their lives was the biggest mistake they'd ever made. The park meeting tomorrow wouldn't go how Marcus expected. And by the time I was finished with both of them, they'd wish they'd stayed in that Tesla and driven away before I caught them. Wish they'd been honest instead of sneaky. Wish they'd understood that betrayal has consequences that last much longer than the cheap thrill of getting away with something. They were about to learn that lesson the hard way, and I was going to enjoy every single second of watching them realize too late that they'd chosen the wrong person to underestimate. I arrived at the park 15 minutes early and positioned myself at a bench with clear sightlines in every direction. Marcus showed up exactly on time, looking nervous in a way I'd never seen before. He sat down with too much space between us and started talking immediately, his prepared speech tumbling out in rehearsed phrases about needing honesty and how relationships require both people to be fully invested. He said he'd been doing a lot of thinking, that he cared about me deeply, but wondered if we wanted the same things. The cowardice of it, the way he was making me responsible for his decision to betray me, was almost beautiful in its predictability. I let him finish his entire speech before I pulled out my phone. I didn't say anything, just pulled up the photo folder Tyler had sent me and handed it to Marcus. I watched his face change as he scrolled through images of himself and Chelsea at his apartment, at coffee shops, at the gym in moments that were clearly coordinated, not coincidental. The private investigator had been thorough, capturing timestamps and locations that contradicted every story they'd both told me. Marcus's hands were shaking when he tried to hand my phone back, attempting to explain that these photos were taken out of context, that nothing had actually happened between them. That's when I told him I knew about the fake pregnancy test Chelsea had bought. I described the exact brand, the Amazon order number, the delivery date to Tyler's address. I told him about Derek from the yoga studio and their plan to split whatever money Chelsea extracted from Marcus once she trapped him with a fabricated baby. I explained how Chelsea's iCloud account had given me access to months of deleted messages, calendar entries, and notes detailing every step of her scheme to replace me. Marcus went completely white, realizing he'd been a mark the entire time, that the woman he'd been sneaking around with had viewed him as nothing more than a wallet with good credit. Then I played the audio recording. Tyler had helped me set up a situation 3 days earlier where Chelsea thought she was meeting with a life coach she'd found online, someone who could help her manifest her dream life. The life coach was actually someone Tyler had paid to extract information, and Chelsea had laid out her entire plan on tape, describing me as too boring to keep a rich guy interested, and Marcus as emotionally shallow enough to fall for the pregnancy trap. She'd laughed about how easy it had been to manipulate both of us, how I'd been so trusting that I'd essentially handed her the blueprint to steal my boyfriend. The recording was 18 minutes long, and I made Marcus listen to every second. When it finished, Marcus looked destroyed. He started to speak, but I held up my hand. I told him I'd already packed the rest of my things from his apartment, that Ramon, the security guard, had helped me move them out yesterday while Marcus was at work. I explained that I'd contacted 3 of his major business associates, the ones who valued family values and loyalty in their partnerships, and sent them the entire evidence file with a note explaining that I thought they should know the kind of person they were dealing with. I'd timed the emails to send during our park meeting, so his phone started buzzing with incoming calls as I spoke. His face went from white to gray as he looked at his phone screen and saw the names. These were relationships worth millions in future contracts, partnerships built on personal trust that I'd just systematically destroyed. I told him I'd also forwarded everything to his mother, who'd always been cold to me but would be absolutely horrified to discover her son had been sneaking around with his girlfriend's best friend. Marcus tried to grab my hand, started begging me to help him fix this, saying he'd made a terrible mistake but we could work through it. I pulled my hand away and told him the only mistake was his belief that I'd be easy to discard. I stood up to leave, and he followed me, voice rising as he demanded I think about what I was doing to his career, his reputation, his relationships with people who mattered. That's when I turned around and delivered the line I'd been saving. I told him that Chelsea was waiting for him at a bar downtown right now, that I'd texted her an hour ago pretending to be him, suggesting they finally meet openly since I'd given him the perfect opening to end things with me. She'd responded immediately with the address and a promise to make it worth his while. Marcus looked at his phone and saw the messages I'd sent from the burner phone number I'd set up to clone his contact information. He tried to tell me that wasn't fair, that I was manipulating Chelsea the same way she'd manipulated me. I laughed out loud at that. Actually laughed in his face in that park where expensive strollers passed and people walked dogs that cost more than my monthly rent. I told him manipulation would be tricking someone into betraying themselves, but Chelsea had chosen every step of her betrayal freely, eagerly, proudly. I'd simply given her enough rope to hang herself with, and she'd been so eager to use it that she'd practically braided it herself. Marcus just stood there as I walked away, his phone still buzzing with calls from business associates, demanding explanations for the evidence files they'd received. I got in my car and drove straight to the bar, where Chelsea was waiting. She'd chosen somewhere trendy in the seaport, had clearly dressed up in a tight dress that she'd probably charged to a credit card she couldn't afford. I could see her through the window, checking her phone anxiously, touching up her lipstick, practicing her smile. She looked so confident, so certain that tonight was the beginning of her new life with Marcus's money. I took a photo of her sitting there alone and texted it to Tyler with one word: ready. His response was immediate. Judge signed the emergency custody order an hour ago. Sheriff's on the way to serve her. I walked into the bar and watched Chelsea's face cycle through confusion, panic, and desperate calculation when she saw me instead of Marcus. She tried to play it off, claiming she was just meeting a girlfriend for drinks, but her outfit and the corner booth she'd chosen and the bottle of expensive champagne she'd already ordered told the real story. I slid into the booth across from her and placed my phone on the table between us, the screen showing the message thread where she'd confirmed meeting Marcus here tonight. Her eyes went to the phone and then to my face, and I saw the moment she realized I'd been playing her exactly the way she'd tried to play me. I told her everything I knew, laying it out methodically. The iCloud access, the deleted messages, the fake pregnancy test, Derek's cut of the profits, the recordings, the timeline of every lie she'd told. Chelsea tried to interrupt multiple times, her voice getting higher and more frantic, but I just kept talking over her. I explained how Tyler had been documenting everything for the custody case, how the judge had reviewed the evidence and decided that someone planning to trap a man with a fake pregnancy was clearly not stable enough to have primary custody of a 3-year-old child. I told her the sheriff was probably at her apartment right now serving the emergency custody order, that Emma would be staying with Tyler exclusively while Chelsea faced multiple fraud charges related to the fake pregnancy scheme. Chelsea's face crumpled and she started crying, mascara running down her cheeks as she begged me to understand that she'd only done it because she was desperate. She said she was drowning in debt, that Emma's preschool was expensive, that she'd just wanted security for her daughter. I reminded her that Tyler paid her rent and Emma's expenses, that the debt was from shopping sprees and nights out that she'd documented obsessively on Instagram. She shifted tactics, trying to blame Marcus, saying he'd pursued her and made her think I was practically his ex already. I pulled up the messages where she'd texted Derek about phase 1 of getting close to me to access Marcus, messages dated 2 months before Marcus had shown any interest in her at all. That's when Chelsea got mean, her tears drying up as she hissed that I was a vindictive psycho who couldn't handle that Marcus wanted someone more exciting. She said I'd always been boring and judgmental, that everyone in our friend group had only tolerated me because I was useful for organizing things. She told me Marcus had complained about me constantly during their gym sessions, said I was clingy and unambitious and bad in bed. The performance was almost impressive, except I'd recorded the entire conversation on the phone sitting between us, and every word she'd just said would play beautifully in the custody hearing scheduled for next week. I let her finish her rant before I showed her the other phone in my purse, the one with the recording app running. Her face went slack with horror as she realized she'd just handed Tyler even more ammunition for the custody case. I told her that her lawyer, if she bothered to get one, would explain that conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted extortion, and documented intention to falsely claim paternity were all serious charges. The fake pregnancy test company she'd ordered from had already provided documentation to my attorney proving the purchase was for a guaranteed false positive. Chelsea tried to grab my phone, her movements desperate and clumsy, but I was already standing up and backing away. The bartender had been watching our interaction carefully, probably sensing the tension, and he moved closer as Chelsea lunged toward me again. I told her loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear that she should check her phone, that her social circle was about to get very interesting. While we'd been talking, Tyler had posted on his Facebook page, which was connected to all their mutual friends and Chelsea's family. He'd shared a carefully edited version of the evidence, just enough to make it clear that Chelsea had been planning to trap someone with a fake pregnancy, and that he was seeking full custody of Emma to protect his daughter from that kind of instability. The post was already generating dozens of comments and shares. Chelsea's phone started buzzing on the table, calls and texts flooding in as people saw Tyler's post. She grabbed it and scrolled through the messages, her face going from red to white as she read responses from friends taking Tyler's side, family members expressing shock and disappointment, colleagues from her marketing firm asking if the allegations were true. Someone had already called her boss to ask if the company was aware of their employees' personal conduct. Chelsea looked up at me with pure hatred in her eyes and screamed that I'd ruined her life. I told her she'd done that herself the moment she decided my friendship and my boyfriend were both things she could steal without consequences. As I walked out of the bar, I passed Marcus coming in, clearly having received Chelsea's desperate texts about me ambushing her. He looked between us, putting together what had happened, and made the choice to go to Chelsea instead of following me. I watched through the window as she threw herself into his arms, sobbing about how I'd ruined everything, and saw him actually buy into the victim narrative she was selling. They deserved each other. Two people who saw relationships as transactions and other people as resources to be exploited. I got in my car and drove to Tyler's house, where Emma was already settled in her room with her favorite stuffed animals and a new nightlight. Tyler looked exhausted but relieved, holding the custody order like it was made of gold. The next morning, I woke up to discover Marcus had tried calling me 17 times overnight. His voicemail started apologetic and devolved into angry, and then landed somewhere around desperate. He'd apparently spent the evening with Chelsea learning exactly how deep her scheme had gone, how she'd played him just as much as she'd played me, how he'd been nothing but a wallet with good credit to her from the beginning. The business associates I'd sent evidence to had already started pulling their partnerships, making it clear they didn't work with people who snuck around behind their partners' backs. His mother had apparently called him crying about how disappointed his late father would have been, which, according to the voicemail, was somehow worse than losing the business deals. The final voicemail was Marcus's attempt at groveling. He said he understood now what I'd been trying to show him, that Chelsea had manipulated both of us, that if I just called him back, we could expose her together and rebuild what we'd had. The delusion was staggering. I deleted all 17 voicemails without responding and blocked his number. Chelsea tried texting me from various friends' phones, messages that alternated between threatening legal action and begging me to tell Tyler to drop the custody case. I blocked each number as it came through and went about my day like neither of them existed anymore. 2 weeks later, Tyler called to tell me the custody hearing had gone exactly as expected. Chelsea had showed up with a public defender who clearly hadn't had time to prepare, while Tyler had a family law specialist who'd presented the evidence so methodically that the judge had barely needed to deliberate. Emma would stay with Tyler full-time. Chelsea got supervised visitation every other weekend, and the judge had strongly suggested she seek therapy before they'd consider revisiting the arrangement. The fake pregnancy scheme had also attracted attention from the district attorney's office, who were considering charges related to attempted fraud and conspiracy. Derek from the yoga studio had already accepted a plea deal and agreed to testify against Chelsea about their planning sessions. Marcus's business apparently recovered somewhat, but his reputation never would. Someone had shared the evidence folder on a business networking site, and while most people moved past it quickly, enough hadn't that his name came with whispered context at industry events. His mother had apparently stopped speaking to him entirely, which, according to mutual friends, hurt worse than the lost contracts. Chelsea lost her marketing job after her boss decided the personal drama was creating a hostile work environment, and her Instagram account that had once been carefully curated ambition had gone dark after people started commenting about the custody situation on every post. I got a new apartment in Cambridge, something small and affordable that was completely mine without memories of Marcus contaminating every surface. Tyler and I had become genuine friends through the process, bonding over shared betrayal and the satisfaction of watching karma work faster than we'd expected. He started bringing Emma over for dinners sometimes, and she called me Miss Vivian and made me crayon drawings of cats. My real friends, the ones who'd stuck around after the Chelsea explosion, helped me paint the new apartment and brought housewarming gifts, and never once suggested I'd overreacted to the situation. 6 months later, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop near my office. He looked different. Older somehow, with gray at his temples that hadn't been there before, and permanent worry lines around his eyes. He tried to approach me, but I held up my hand and told him we had nothing to discuss. He persisted anyway, saying he'd been in therapy and understood now how badly he'd handled everything, how he'd let his ego make him susceptible to Chelsea's manipulation. He wanted me to know he was sorry and that he hoped I was doing well. I told him I was doing exceptionally well, that I'd recently been promoted at work and was seeing someone new who actually understood concepts like loyalty and respect. The lie about seeing someone was unnecessary but satisfying, especially when I saw hurt flash across Marcus's face. He tried to ask who I was dating, and I laughed at the audacity of him thinking he had any right to that information. I told him I'd heard through mutual friends that he and Chelsea had tried dating after everything imploded, that it had lasted less than 3 weeks before they'd both realized they'd destroyed their lives over someone they didn't even particularly like. Marcus's face confirmed it was true before he could even try to deny it. He mumbled something about making mistakes and learning from them, and I told him the only thing he needed to learn was to leave me alone permanently. Chelsea I never saw again in person, but social media and mutual friends provided occasional updates. She'd moved back to Wisconsin to live with her parents, had taken a job managing social media for a local hardware store, had posted exactly 3 times in 6 months, and all of them were Bible verses about redemption and forgiveness. Emma apparently thrived with Tyler, excelling in preschool and showing none of the anxiety she'd displayed when Chelsea had primary custody. Tyler had started dating someone new, a teacher at Emma's school who was kind and stable and everything Chelsea had never been. My new apartment became my sanctuary, decorated exactly how I wanted, without compromising for someone else's taste or budget. I got a cat, a massive orange tabby I named Justice because I'm petty like that. I reconnected with college friends I'd let drift during the Marcus years, and discovered I genuinely enjoyed having a social life that didn't revolve around his schedule or Chelsea's manufactured emergencies. Work became more fulfilling once I wasn't constantly distracted by relationship anxiety, and the promotion came naturally once I could focus properly on my projects. Sometimes I thought about what would have happened if I hadn't come home early that night, if I hadn't seen Chelsea climbing out of Marcus's Tesla at 2 a.m. How long would they have kept up the charade? When would Chelsea have sprung her fake pregnancy trap? How many more months would I have wasted on someone who saw me as disposable? The universe had done me a favor by letting me catch them before they'd completely succeeded in their scheme. And I'd returned the favor by making sure they both understood exactly what they'd lost. Marcus apparently told people he'd learned his lesson about appreciating what you have, but appreciation means nothing without action, and his actions had shown me everything I needed to know. Chelsea occasionally tried following my Instagram from burner accounts, but I kept my profile private and my life completely separate from anyone who'd known her. I refused to give her even the small satisfaction of seeing that I'd moved on and was happy. She didn't deserve to know anything about my life after what she'd tried to take from it. The best revenge, people always said, was living well. But I'd discovered something better. Living well while knowing the people who'd betrayed you were living with the permanent consequences of their choices. Chelsea had lost her daughter, her reputation, her job, and her carefully curated social media presence. Marcus had lost business relationships, his mother's respect, and the comfortable assumption that he could treat people however he wanted without repercussions. And I had everything: my dignity, my independence, my cat named Justice, and the absolute certainty that I'd never again ignore red flags because someone made me feel special. Tyler sent me a photo last week of Emma on her first day of kindergarten, holding a homemade sign and grinning at the camera. She looked happy and secure in ways she never had in Chelsea's chaotic care. He'd captioned it, "Thanks for helping me protect her," and I'd saved the photo to my favorites. Some revenge was about destruction, but the sweetest kind was about protection and rebuilding, and ensuring that the people who deserved better actually got it. Chelsea could spend the rest of her life trying to explain away her choices to whoever would still listen. Marcus could work on rebuilding a reputation that would always have whispers attached, and I could continue living exactly the life I wanted, surrounded by people who'd proven they valued me for more than what I could provide them. They'd both learned an expensive lesson about underestimating quiet women. I'd learned something too, that trusting my instincts and refusing to accept less than I deserved was the most powerful choice I could make. Justice, the cat, purred agreement from my lap as I deleted the last blocked number from my phone and settled in to enjoy my Saturday morning exactly how I wanted to spend it. In peace, in control, and completely free of people who'd proven they didn't deserve to be part of my story.